Good morning, kids. It is good to be with you again. Now, in today's story, this is our last week of talking about Jesus's teachings. Jesus's teachings, right? The previous 2 weeks, we talked about the Sermon on the Mount, and it's this whole it's probably like 3 chapters worth in the Bible of teachings that Jesus did. And we just picked out a couple, right, that kind of stood out. Today's passage is not the Sermon on the Mount, but I think it's very interesting and very important for us. So, in today's story, Jesus is talking to people who are called teachers of the law. They are like the religious leaders. Maybe you would think of them as like a pastor, right? And these teachers are asking Jesus a whole bunch of questions, and they're trying to trick him and trap him with his answers, right? Because they don't like Jesus and they don't want him to take away their followers so that they would follow Jesus. But these teachers, they're asking him all these questions, and Jesus is just answering question after question after question, and he's like nailing all of them, and they're all so interesting. But one teacher, he comes up to Jesus and he says, "What is the greatest commandment?" What is the greatest commandment? Now, in the past, we've talked about the 10 commandments that God gave to Moses. So I want to ask you, if someone were to ask you, what is the most important rule in all of life, what would you answer? What is the most important rule in all of life? That's a tricky question. Luckily, we have Jesus who answered it for us. Jesus said this. He said, the most important commandment is to love God with all your heart. And the second is very similar, he said. It's to love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus says the two most important things that we can worry about in all of life is, are we loving God with our whole heart, and are we loving our neighbor the way that we love ourselves? I love this answer because sometimes life can feel so complicated, right? What am I supposed to do next? What should, who should I be friends with? What kind of things should I be into? What kind of job do I want to have one day? What should my family look like? All these different questions, and they can feel very big. But at the heart of everything, right, the simple truth is, in this life, all we need to do is love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, and the rest will be taken care of, right? These are the two most important things that Jesus says we can do, is to love God and love other people. Do you think you could do that? I think you could do that. To love God and love other people. It's so simple. Now, it's not easy, right? Sometimes we can get distracted. Sometimes someone may be someone that we don't particularly like, and it's hard to love them, right? Sometimes we can forget about God for days or weeks on end because we're so busy, right? It's hard sometimes to love God and love other people, but it's simple to remember what we're supposed to do. So if you're ever somewhere and you're like, I just don't know what to do in this situation, you can ask yourself, what would it look like to love God in this situation? And what would it look like to love other people in this situation? And the rest will take care of itself. So that is it for Jesus's teachings. Next week, next week, we are going to be talking about the Passion Week, and it's basically the last week of Jesus's life, right? The last week of Jesus's life. And it's going to be broken down into a bunch of different weeks because so much happens. So look forward to that next week. I hope you're doing well, and I will talk with you soon.